But Ultra, thank you so very much for joining us tonight. So we're going to talk about Ultra's journey in the sciences and some sustainable farming, conservation, fish genetics, and more. We already had the bioethics questions coming on in. Could you give us a little bit of an introduction about who you are and what is your scientific background?
Absolutely. So for those of you that don't know me, my name is Ultrasaurus. I'm a mixed-race Canadian streamer. We do a lot of simulation, survival, and strategy games on Twitch. I am, as of November, officially a full-time content creator, so I do this for a job. And I don't know if you caught it from my name, but we love dinosaurs. The Ultrasaurus is actually a dinosaur too, by the way. And in terms of my educational background, I have a Bachelor of Science in Biology, where I focused a lot of my schooling on animal ethics and welfare, specifically with a lot of the intensification of agriculture, so animal farms on Canada.
What made you interested originally in the sciences? Like, what was it that brought you towards the scientific question? Was it breaking things as a kid? Was it putting things back together? was it animals? Because again, of the farming connection, what was it?
You know what? I've actually never stopped to think about that, but I think the animals were a really big thing for me. Especially, I loved the Discovery Channel as a kid. I loved learning. I loved just like soaking in information. And like, I was kind of that annoying kid, especially around adults. Like, I always had questions. I just wanted to understand the world around me a little bit better. And even I remember, I've got a wild memory. I remember specifically in kindergarten, the teacher was like showing us photos of dinosaurs. And she's like, "Do you guys know what extinct means?" And I'm like, "Yes, I do." But yeah, going into high school and taking more of the sciences, I grasped the information very easily and I loved what I was learning. And we can talk about this later, but I kind of had an interesting change in gears in terms of like, I focus on biology, but I've always been a STEM science person. But partway through my university schooling, I kind of rediscovered my love for biology.
So there was a bit of a love lost and then a regain later on.
It wasn't even a love lost. I just had different plans, different ideas for what I wanted to do with my life and my career. And I had several kind of pivotal moments all throughout my post-secondary schooling where I kind of learned more and more and more about myself and kept pivoting and changing what I was going to do.
Would you say then the like there was a heavy importance on being able to do a little career exploration, see different things and different like avenues of learning, right? Like that seems to be a lot of like hit and miss on whether or not you should go explore versus not. Like what all were you exploring at the time of like maybe this, maybe that? Like what were some of your interests?
I mean, if you're interested, I can kind of just tell the story of like my, I guess, educational journey, if you're okay with that. And it kind of overviews that too.
I might interject and ask some questions if that's okay.
That's totally okay. A lot of people don't know this, but I didn't graduate from high school. I didn't. I had a really tough time in high school, and because of health issues, I didn't graduate. And I think it's really, really hard for kids in high school because you're basically, it's drilled into you that like graduating high school and going to university or college right after, like that's the end all be all, and you got to have your life figured out. And I don't know, you kind of are put into this situation where I felt like a failure. I wasn't sure what I was going to do with my life. And people shouldn't have to feel that way because A, you don't have to go to post-secondary to be successful in life. There are so many different avenues, so many different things that you can do. But B, it's just that pressure that it kind of seems like life is set in a linear fashion from high school onwards. And if you don't fit what the world expects you to do, then what are you doing? I took the year off and I basically went back and I got my high school equivalency at a smaller university. And in doing that, I remembered like, gosh, I love chemistry. Gosh, I love math. And as I was working on this stuff, I decided, I don't even know how it came to be, but I think it's because I like problem solving. I was like, you know what? I've become an engineer. And so I got my high school equivalency and I got accepted into the engineering program and I started working my way through university there. And I took physics and I realized I should not be working on any bridges or anything structural. And this is not the life I want to lead. I love everything about engineering, but the physics next part, which is arguably probably the most important part.
That's the part that I found the most terrifying as well. Just like, well, there's letters and numbers and they're all mixed together here and all the equations coming on in. It was just not as a straightforward, like in my brain, as other properties were as well.
Yeah. And so it was at that moment where even though everything that I'd worked towards at that point was all based towards engineering, I stopped and I was like, do I really want to do this? You're not enjoying this right now. It's not going to get any better. And I reflected on what was important to me in life and what I valued and, enjoyment out of the work that I do, or just even enjoyment in getting the education that I'm paying for. Let's do something that we like. And I kind of looked back to my roots. What do I like? I love animals. I love biology. I just soak up that information like a sponge. And so I reached for the stars and I wanted to go into pathology because I love lab work. A big goal of mine has been wanting to make a difference in the world, wanting to make change, wanting to do good. And so I was like, if I work with like cancer research, I think that's a really good start. And I went from not graduating high school to transferring to one of the top 50 universities in the world. Wow. So if I can do it, you can do it. Like, don't let people tell you what you can't or can't do. You can do anything you put your mind to, 100%.
What would you say was the most difficult part of that transition, right? Like you said, like getting into one of the top colleges, right? Universities, like was it more the stigma of you not being able to make it from other people? Was it self-reflection? Like what was it like, or what advice would you give to someone who's in a similar track who would like to go through these, the motions and actually jump into these kinds of university settings?
Yeah, absolutely. I guess for me, first and foremost, it's all mind over matter. You want to do something, put your mind to it. And a lot of what I did and went through was self-motivation. I wanted to go to university. I wanted that degree or that level of education. And, you have to have that level of determination to stick through and go through it. But I think what was also really hard was, like I didn't graduate high school and all of my friends that I went to school with are already way deep into university. And I felt very judged. I felt it was hard for me to even make friends in university too, because everybody was a lot younger than me. And so I think focusing on myself, focusing on the end goal, focusing on bettering myself and not worrying about what other people thought, whether it be my classmates or my friends. My family's always been very supportive, so I don't have to worry about them. But yeah, no, that was definitely like I felt very proud of myself for accomplishing and achieving what I did because I knew it was there and I knew a lot of people didn't believe in me, but I believed in myself, which was, I think, really important and instrumental.
It really is. And that's something that's unfortunately drilled out of a lot of people. Like even a lot of folks in chat are saying, how much value is tied to graduating that high school versus actually branching out and being able to pursue different things. And so you being able to have the support network from the family, but also that really strong self-drive, like you said, made that world of a difference. So what was the next step for you, Ultra?
Yeah, and so I went to this next university with every intention of going to med school and becoming a pathologist. And end of the day, if I really wanted to have done that, I think I could have. But I really do encourage other people who are either not maybe in post-secondary yet or are in post-secondary right now. Just because you have a goal in mind, you're going to become A, B, C, or D. Try other courses. Look at what interests you. I took some wild courses in university. Like I took a course like an ornithology course where we did birding. I took a course on horses. I took a course on dinosaurs and a course on insects. Is that ever going to help me become a pathologist? Absolutely not. But it made me realize that, maybe I actually don't want to become a pathologist. Maybe I don't want to go to school for another 8 years. Maybe I'm happy actually doubling down and learning more about these things that actually really interest me, where I'm excited to go to class to learn more. And so that was kind of that other transitionary period of, well, I want to become a doctor and do this, but I really like this.
So it was being able to identify your passion versus just let me chase this maybe laid out conventional path, right?
Exactly.
And it's really cool that you took a horse class because you're also maybe a little known fact for folks. You are a horseback rideress, right?
And I went into that course. Not that I was like, I know everything, but I was like, what am I going to learn? I ride horses. I'm around them all the time. Like, I know basic biology. I learned things I didn't know about gastroliths, the stones that form in a horse's intestines that they literally look like pearls because they're just like polished over time through like the movement in their guts. You learn about equine pain face. You can gauge how much pain a horse is in by certain facial cues, and you can actually measure this. I learned a lot of really cool things, and I learned that horses are just what's the word I'm looking for? Their bodies are not built very well. They're kind of built to fail. Their intestinal tract is awful and very flawed. So yeah, no, it's super cool, and I would like that's my one word of advice to anybody who's in post-secondary is try things you're interested in, because even if you finish your degree, I know people who have gotten degrees in business and they have that, and they actually go back to school because they're like, actually, I want to become a vet. I want to go back into biology. There's nothing wrong with that.
Which one of the classes that were almost like rabbit holes at the time, which one of them kind of drove you towards that love of the animals and not being a pathologist?
It actually was straight up an animal ethics and welfare course, and I took there were certain different variations of it at different levels that focused on unique and different parts of the world or the systems, and I think I took 3 or 4 of those courses, all of them with the same prof, and he's retired now, but gosh, it was such a treat being able to learn animal ethics and welfare from this professor. He made the course, but the information was also really interesting. And I will say that was a course where I went into it with my own developed opinions and thoughts, and it blew my mind. They basically taught animal ethics and welfare very much from an objective scientific standpoint. They didn't have a narrative. They didn't have any bias. They were like, here's the facts. Here's the information about the systems. Do what you want with that information. But I just really love how the information was presented, and like the fact that I just kept taking more and more of these courses. Like if there were 5 or 6 of them, I would have taken all 5 or 6. And so definitely that was very much I don't think we're becoming a pathologist anymore moment.
Did you, for some of us who maybe didn't have the opportunity to take this kind of class, could you let us know just like what exactly is an animal ethics course? What is that about? What is the end goal of it, and what are you learning? Because it's one of those where it's like people say animal ethics and welfare, but it feels almost like this catch-all term now. Like, what did it mean in this context?
The introductory course that I took, it basically went over several different things. It went over, I'm Canadian, so a lot of the farming stuff that we learned was specific to Canada, but it talked about, the different farming systems with pigs, with cows, with chickens, and, just different types of housing, the problems that you would encounter, like, parasites or lameness or, certain medical procedures. So it kind of went over a very general, broad overview of the systems. And it was very enlightening because a lot of things that you see at face value in these farms, you would go, oh, wow, that looks really bad. That's very cruel. That's awful. We should stop that. But then you learn, okay, well, the alternative is, sure, this looks nicer and happier, but now they're going to get injured and the animals are all going to kill themselves. And it's actually wild. If you guys don't know this, chickens are very prone to cannibalizing each other. That's a problem with raising chickens. And so, yeah, it's not nice. So that was one aspect. Other aspects were focusing on conservation and like the aspects of like hunting and trophy hunting and what does that mean, and especially for they brought up like the fox hound hunts that they do and just like the different levels of stress and the morality behind things. I know we talked about this the other day, but with places where you can pay to hunt animals in Africa, it's not black and white. It's not just good and bad. It's kind of gray area, because in these areas, these locals are paid very, very well to protect this specific area of animals to continue this tourist industry. And so there's an incentive to conserve and protect these animals, whereas in other conservation areas, yes, they have protection. Yes, there are people hired there, but there's not that level of investment by not just people working there, but the village. research to keep these animals safe. And then we also learned a lot about looking into charities, looking into organizations and what makes a good charity, good organization, doing some deep learning and diving deep into, looking up an organization and finding all of the information to find out, well, is this a good charity? Is the money going towards the animals?
So it's not a given, right? Like that is the myth, right? That all charities are going to be giving everything to the animals. So because you mentioned you were going to be doing a charity stream soon too, is that something that you actively look into and see like what's a good viable charity?
Absolutely. No, some charities, of course they have to resonate with me too, but certain charities where face value, they look like they would resonate with me, and I do some research and it's like, think not.
So always vet your charities.
Always. Yeah, do your research.
With this course, I mean, it's really cool, like the breadth and depth that the course went into, and like being able to make a lot of things accessible that maybe previously one would not normally think about, because it almost feels like it's not a secondary nature to think about some of these factors. But it's really cool about how, I mean, it just seems eye-opening the way you're telling me too about like the things that you're able to learn. So what were some of the next steps? Like this class, you fell in love with the idea of animal ethics and pursuing it. Where do you go with that? Where do you go from there?
Originally the plan was, I love animals. And I was like, I wanted to become a vet. Let's go to vet school, right? I can work with animals. I can, implement these practices in person. And, while I was going to school, I didn't go to school full time because I couldn't afford to go to university full time. And, where's the money coming from? So I work at a farm. I work with animals. And so I was working part-time at the farm, going to school part-time. And vet school didn't want me because I was not a full-time student. Even though I had the grades, even though I had the experience, I volunteered at a vet clinic for an entire summer. They basically said, no, you weren't a full-time student. And I actually called them out on it. I was like, so you're saying because of my socioeconomic background, because I didn't have very well-off parents that could fully pay for my schooling and I could school full-time, you guys are not accepting me because I'm just not well-off enough. And the lady was so incredibly uncomfortable on the phone, but she couldn't say no. And that's when I started realizing that I could have pursued vet school in other avenues, but I felt like that was life telling me what it was pointing me in a different direction. And I realized that I could use my platform here on Twitch to actually talk about these subjects and educate people and do good that way.
That is a really, really frustrating take that's what you had to go through, right? It feels like almost at that point it wasn't really your decision, it was the decision of the institution. Yeah, I'm just really sorry you had to go through that. It's super, super frustrating, but we're all the better to having you here on Twitch to tell us about these.
Absolutely.
It's weird how sometimes the universe works itself out for the better.
Absolutely. And at the time, again, I could have pursued vet school in other ways, but it would have involved a lot of hurdles and obstacles. And if I was truly that determined, could have done it. But I was just like, how committed are we to just jumping all over the place to get this? And if I don't know if I don't know if it's the same thing for vets in America, but Canadian vets are like super underpaid, super overworked. There's not enough vets in the country for the pets that we have. And so I was like, why am I going out of my way to get an education and a job that is already going to be kicking me when I'm down?
Yeah. There's that, and also it's just as hard, if not harder, to go through veterinary school as it is medical school, and the cost too. So it all, at least in the U.S., it all really, really adds up very quickly. So when you were doing the farm life in the same time as doing the courses, do you see or feel things that you had taken in your ethics course that maybe you saw at the farmland that where things were done right, or things that were done not as well as you maybe would have hoped now with that new lens of knowledge? Like, how did that change your view on farming?
Yeah, I would say for the most part, because I am on a smaller farm, we're able to like pay more attention to the animals. And so generally speaking, I would say my lens of the farm hasn't really changed that much. It's all been pretty good. I mean, if things were bad to begin with, I probably wouldn't have been working there. But it definitely, I started paying attention more to like when the vet would come in and do procedures. And And especially when we had new management come in, they were very, very, like make sure that we have anesthetic, make sure that we have analgesics to give the animals after the procedure so they're nice and comfortable. And so it's all like I noticed this more. It was all already happening on the farm though. And it's just nice to know, stereotypical behaviors. So these are behaviors that animals perform when they're really, really stressed out. And these behaviors are a way of soothing themselves, and knowing what stereotypical behaviors are and looking at our animals and they're all happy, fat, enjoying life.
And like you said, it wasn't just a straight shot either in the ethics class, whereas just like here you do this and all the needs will be met. There was this like fine balance, right, of like either direction that you're going in, it has to be done in a right way that suits each particular and unique animal, which again ties back to kind of your love of animals and ensuring that they are, being taken care of in the appropriate way. And I just think that's a really cool like roundabout of how it, like as a kid back to where you are now, like you're still fighting for animal rights. And I think that's really special.
I'm very, very fortunate and grateful that I have this platform to be able to do it. And as you mentioned earlier, I didn't think in a million and one years that I'd be here on the front page of Twitch talking about fish conservation, sustainability, and aquaculture.
I think that's really well said. We have some questions too about continuing your journey in the sciences. So, we are chatting like Women's History Month and the importance of keeping women in STEM. Would you be able to give us a little bit of a glean into, with your journey, what was it like being a woman in STEM throughout this journey in terms of accessibility? And what would you say to someone who's thinking about this journey and also like diving into STEM as a woman?
Yeah, I would say, thankfully, at least for me in my experience, especially being in Canada, it's very multicultural. I really didn't have any barriers to education or the type of education I got. I am very fortunate in the sense that I never felt like my gender influenced my schooling. If anything, in a lot of these science courses, I would say it was predominantly women in these courses too. I think the women outnumbered the men, which is not actually what I was expecting when I went into school. Like I kind of had this perception of, sciences, like I don't know why I thought there would be more men, but no, the women outnumbered the men, absolutely. I would say that for other women out there in chat, especially if you are someone involved in STEM, don't underestimate your value or your importance. And because there are a lot of other women who they will look up to you and they see you as a role model. And I've actually had a lot of women express to me that, especially more in like engineering, which is something I didn't continue pursuing, but they felt more comfortable when they had more women in the class or there was a female professor or female TA. Like they saw that and they noticed that and they felt less isolated and more comfortable in that environment. And so for us women out there, just we're existing, we're talking about what we're doing. Even that is you're doing so much for other women in just making them feel more comfortable and safe in this space. But yeah, no, I'm really fortunate that, with my experiences, it was very, very positive. But I know for other women out there, that's not necessarily the story, especially when it comes to like even outside of school on a more professional level as well. There's just a lot of crap that women have to deal with in STEM.
As someone who's gone through the schooling, as someone who's done hard work, as someone who has the passion, as someone who's experienced the economic discrimination that you have, as someone who's now a successful content creator, Twitch pushing for ambassador, I must say. What does it mean to you to not only be a woman in STEM, but be someone that other women in the sciences or getting into the sciences can look up to?
It means the world to me that I'm able to do what I do on Twitch and educate and advocate for science and be that role model, be that person. And I've got pretty thick skin, and so people can say things to me, it doesn't deter me, and I am that person who is unapologetically, I'm staying here, whether it has to do with my hobbies or being a person in STEM. You can't scare me out of what I'm doing because I'm a woman, and I'm hoping that in being that role model, it normalizes women in these positions. Basically, I'm not an anomaly. There's a lot of us out there, and the sexism and the crappy comments aren't going to change that. I've noticed, especially not so much on the STEM side, but a lot of the simulation games that I play, it's not a lot of women play it, but through me streaming these games and putting myself out there, I've had a lot of women approach me being like, wow, it is so good to see another female playing this. Like, I thought I was alone. Like, it's so good to see you there. And I hope through, in talking about science and being in these positions that through being transparent and unapologetically myself, representing women, that, it just helps women be more comfortable. And it's really good to see that times are changing and things are changing and progress is being made and more progress needs to be made. But just the fact that there was genuinely, through the sciences, more women than men in my classes. It was great to see. It was fantastic.
I can't tell you how happy I am that you are unapologetically you. That's what y'all like immediately, I think, drew our friendship together, is that you can very easily tell that Ultra is in fact genuine. This isn't for show. This is who she is. She is, in fact, passionate about these things. And, ma'am, I hope just more people look up to you. And more people, if they need anyone to emulate, it should be you, because you are absolutely incredible. Ultra, thank you so very much for joining us tonight. That was incredible, as it always is. That was a lot of fun chatting about, again, your journey in the sciences, about the message for women in STEM and maintaining women in STEM. Yeah, you do inspire.
Thank you for having me. This is stuff that I feel like it's very apparent. I love talking about this stuff. I love learning, but I also love teaching, and things that I grasp onto where I'm like, that's super cool. I'm also like, let me tell you this really cool thing, right? Like, I just love sharing. And again, like, just circling back, like, I respect what you do here for Twitch, for everything you do with science outreach and education, because this is how we get information out. This is how we educate, and this is how we change the world, honestly. So thank you so much for having me. And I was so tickled pink that you wanted me amongst the many other amazing, fantastic female content creators also in STEM to be here to talk about what we do for the month of March. So thank you for highlighting women and for just being a fantastic advocate.
Seriously, Ultra, thank you so much for your time, your expertise, your presence on Twitch, and your friendship. Really, thank you.
I'm so glad we're friends. I'm so glad we're friends for so many different fantastic reasons. But
have a lovely evening. Thank you again, Ultra.
Thank you. Okay, bye.
Bye.